Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Have you ever stopped to think that some of the most just breathtaking wealth and artistic sophistication, the sheer architectural skill we see in ancient civilizations, actually came before classical Greece, like millennia before?
It's a really common misconception, isn't it? People tend to think of Greece starting with, the Parthenon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about, like, simple huts here. We're talking multi-story palaces, incredibly intricate gold work, complex writing systems, all thousands of years ago. They left this huge mark long before Athens had its golden age.
Absolutely. A really foundational period.
So today we're taking this magnificent journey way back in time. We're aiming for roughly between 3000 and 1000 BCE to explore the captivating world of the Ancient Bronze Age.
It's a huge chunk of time, really.
It is. And we'll be digging into some incredibly rich sources. We've got historical accounts, though there's sometimes fragmentary, detailed archaeological findings, which are crucial, and lots of art analysis. These things together, they paint this vivid picture of three cultures. They're interconnected, definitely, but also really distinct. The early Cycladic, the Minoan, and the Mycenaean.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to get under the skin of these civilizations. We want to uncover the foundational bits, not just, list their achievements, but understand how their art, their architecture, their politics, religion, even their fashion and daily life, how it all sort of meshed together.
Right, how it all worked.
Exactly. We'll pull out the crucial insights, the things that explain how these societies thrived, how they interacted, because they certainly didn't exist in a vacuum, and ultimately how they paved the way for later Greek civilization. Think of this as your shortcut to really grasping this pivotal and often kind of overlooked era.
A shortcut through 2 millennia.
Yeah, something like that. And what's truly amazing, I think, is just how much detail we can actually reconstruct, about life lived thousands of years ago. Even with gaps, the archaeology, the art, it speaks volumes.
So set the scene for us. Imagine a world where bronze wasn't just another metal, it was the cutting-edge tech. Like game-changing stuff for warfare, tools, art, everything.
Fundamentally shifted things, yeah.
And it's a world where sea power meant absolutely everything. It dictated trade routes, influence, defense, the whole deal.
The Aegean is all about the sea, after all.
Definitely. And it's a world where myths and legends, stories like Minos and the Minotaur or the Trojan War, these weren't just bedtime stories. They seem to be woven right into the fabric of society, blurring those lines between history and epic stories.
Reflecting their worldview, their history, their identity.
That's the world. That's the dynamic, vibrant world we're diving into today.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. The Aegean Civilization, that's the umbrella term, right? For this collection of, really sophisticated Bronze Age cultures that popped up all across the Aegean Sea Basin.
Right, that whole area between modern Greece and Turkey.
And spanning that huge period, 3000 to 1000 BCE. 2,000 years. It wasn't just time passing. It was this period of explosive development, innovation, interaction. They really laid the groundwork for so much that came later.
And that location, the Aegean Basin itself, it's so strategic. It's a crossroads.
Absolutely key. Its geography was a massive factor.
For sure. And you mentioned interaction. This was absolutely not an isolated world. That's maybe the first thing to grasp. What's really fascinating is their economic power. These people, they weren't just trading locally. They were master traders on what we'd consider a huge scale for their time.
Right. Where were they getting stuff from?
Well, they needed metal ores, especially tin and copper for bronze. And they were importing these from places as far away as Europe, maybe even Britain for tin, Arabia, Anatolia.
Oh, just think about the logistics.
Yeah.
Getting heavy ores across sea and land back then.
Incredible, isn't it, the organization required? But they weren't just importers, they were also incredibly skilled manufacturers. They took these raw materials and, using really advanced craftsmanship for the era, turned them into these, the sources call them beautiful objects. Tools, weapons, stunning jewelry, pottery, vessels.
Stuff people wanted.
Exactly. Stuff they could export. And they did. They established this vast, complex trading network. And this put them essentially on equal footing with the big players of the time, powerful partners like Egypt and the civilizations of the ancient Near East, like Mesopotamia.
So they weren't just backwater. They were major players.
Absolutely major players, which, makes you ask, how did all this trade, this constant back and forth of goods, people, ideas, how did it shape their culture, their technology, even how they saw the world?
It must have been huge. You get new techniques, new styles.
Oh, definitely. A massive cross-pollination. It wasn't just about exchanging tin for pottery. It was an exchange of, well, maybe artistic motifs, ways of organizing things, maybe even religious ideas. It almost certainly accelerated their development way beyond what isolated cultures could achieve. Their wealth, their sophistication, it was tied directly to being connected.
And thinking about the bigger picture, the long arc of history, what does this mean for, say, Western civilization? Where do they fit in?
Well, the sources are pretty clear on this. Greek civilization, the classical Greece we usually think of, it actually rose later from the Dorians. And the Dorians famously overwhelmed the Mycenaeans.
Ah, so there's a direct link, one replacing the other almost.
Exactly. It's a historical succession. It's not just a random detail. It makes this whole Aegean Bronze Age period incredibly significant for understanding the roots of Western civilization. We can literally trace a line, albeit a complex one, from these Bronze Age powerhouses right through to the classical world.
So history isn't neat boxes. It's more like a relay race, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. Sometimes a violent relay race, perhaps, but definitely a continuity in evolution.
Right. So stepping back again,
Yeah.
the Aegean Bronze Age, it's not just one thing, is it? You mentioned 3 cultures.
Correct. It's absolutely crucial to get this. It's not monolithic. It's more like a rich, complex tapestry. And it's woven from 3 distinct, though definitely connected cultures. You've got the early Cycladic culture, then the Minoan civilization on Crete, and the Mycenaean civilization on the Greek mainland.
Okay. Cycladic, Minoan, Mycenaean.
Each one contributed its own unique threads to this overall picture. They developed their own amazing characteristics, their own styles, their own ways of doing things. And yeah, they interacted, they influenced each other, sometimes they probably fought, but they kept their distinct identities. So we'll explore each one, try to understand what made them unique, but also look for those shared threads that tied the whole Aegean world together back then.
Okay, first stop then. The early Cycladic culture. And the name gives it away, right? They were based on the islands of the Cyclades.
Yep, those islands dotting the Aegean Sea, like Naxos, Paros, Syros.
And what jumps out immediately from the sources about these islanders is this amazing natural resource they had. Loads and loads of pure white marble.
An abundance of it, high-quality marble, too.
And this wasn't just, building material. It became the canvas, the absolute core material for their very distinctive art. It's like marble is Cycladic art in a way. It shaped their whole artistic expression, their identity.
It really did. And the most iconic examples of this are those marble figures. You see them in museums everywhere, usually found at sites like Syros. They're really striking, aren't they? That minimalist beauty.
Yeah, very modern looking almost. And they vary hugely in size.
Dramatically. Some are tiny, just a few inches in length. You could hold them in your hand. But others are practically life-size, reaching 5 feet tall. Monumental pieces.
Wow. And they all have that very simple look.
They do. They're characterized by these simple forms, but that simplicity, it wasn't necessarily just an artistic choice. It was often dictated by the marble itself. The sources mention that stone fractures easily, especially marble, if you try to carve really fine, intricate details.
Ah, okay. So the material kind of pushed them towards that style.
Exactly. That limitation, paradoxically, forced the artists to, distill their subjects, mostly human figures, down to their absolute geometric essentials. And that's what gives them that iconic streamlined style we find so appealing today.
Interesting. And mostly female figures.
Yeah, that's another fascinating detail. Statistically, females are more abundant than males among the known figures. And many, many of them are found lying on graves.
In graves, so connected to death rituals.
Seems very likely. They often have this specific pose. Folded arms, head upright, toes pointed down. Like someone lying in state almost. Which leads to that big question archaeologists still debate. What exactly were they for in the afterlife?
Were they meant to be the dead person? Or gods?
Yeah.
Or protectors?
All possibilities. Were they idealized images? Guardians. Offerings to deities. Companions for the journey. We don't have writing from them to tell us directly, so we're left interpreting the context, the form.
And we usually see them as just plain white marble, right? But that wasn't the whole story.
Not at all. This is absolutely crucial. We see them now as stark white, but originally they had painted facial features, hair, and ornaments in black, red, and blue.
Painted, wow. That changes everything.
Completely. Imagine them with painted eyes, maybe elaborate hairstyles picked out in color, perhaps jewelry details added. They would have looked incredibly vibrant, much more lifelike, maybe even a bit unsettling compared to the minimalist forms we see now.
So our modern view is kind of stripped down.
Very much so. We're missing a huge part of their original impact, their original character without that color.
Okay. And beyond the female figures, there's this other really interesting one. the male harp player from Knossos.
Ah, yes. He's wonderful. While most are female, this one, about 9 inches tall, made of marble, of course, is really profound.
How so?
Well, the source calls it a fully developed sculpture, even though it's small and stylistically simple. It's reduced to its geometric essentials, just like the female figures, but the artist shows this careful attention to those elements that best characterize an actual musician.
Like the posture, the way he holds the harp.
Exactly. It's like the artist knew precisely how to capture the essence of being a musician, the relationship between the player, the instrument, even the chair he sits on, without needing photorealistic detail. It's incredibly economical, artistically speaking.
And what did he mean? Why a harp player?
Again, we're speculating. The text suggests that maybe, wedged between the echoing shapes of chair and instrument, he may be playing for the deceased in the afterlife, a sort of eternal entertainment or accompaniment, but it admits the meaning remains elusive.
Still a mystery.
Absolutely, and that's part of their power, isn't it? These objects, despite their seeming simplicity, they force us to confront how much meaning can be packed into form, even without written explanations. Their artistic choices focusing on essence. That geometric clarity tell us something profound about their worldview, about the purpose of art in their society. Concepts that still resonate, in modern art.
Yeah, that idea of boiling things down to their essentials.
Precisely. It shows art can convey deep meaning even when it's stripped back to basics.
Okay, so from the Cycladic Islands, we sail south to Crete, home of the Minoans.
A truly magnificent civilization.
And the sources really emphasize this point. Crete holds special significance for the development of Western civilization. They call it a direct forerunner of Greek civilization.
It's not just a footnote, it's foundational.
Right. This isn't just some obscure ancient culture. It's a direct link, a profound connection to what many people see as the bedrock of our own culture, influencing architecture, art, maybe even politics and religion down the line. It feels like this is where a lot of our stories really start.
You can definitely trace threads. And the island itself, Crete, its geography was key again. Being an island gave it this incredible natural defense.
Right, harder to attack than the mainland.
Much harder. Its position, right there in the middle of the eastern Mediterranean, acted like a natural fortress. And this advantage seems to explain the really striking absence of fortification around their major cities and palaces, like Knossos.
No big walls. That's weird for the ancient world, isn't it?
It's a huge contrast to, say, the Mycenaeans later on the mainland, who built absolutely massive walls. For the Minoans, it suggests one of two things. Either they lived through a remarkably long period of peace,
Which seems unlikely.
maybe less likely than the alternative, that they possessed such unparalleled naval power, such dominance over the sea, that they could deter threats before they even got close to Cretan shores. Control the sea, control your destiny.
So their navy was their wall.
In effect, yes. That maritime strength probably fostered a sense of security, allowed their culture and economy to flourish without the constant drain of building and manning huge defenses.
And the name Minoan, that comes from a legend, right? King Minos.
It does. It's not what they called themselves. We don't actually know that. The name comes from a much later legend that told of Minos, a king who ruled a palace at Knossos.
The Minosaur guy.
That's the one. Legend says Minos was the son of Zeus and Eurota, a divine parentage connecting him to the king of the gods. He supposedly secured his throne with help from Poseidon, the sea god.
Poseidon again. Ties into that sea power idea.
Exactly. It reinforces that deep connection to the ocean. And from his power base at Knossos, or maybe another palace called Gortyn, the legend says he gained control over the Aegean. So this isn't just a fairy tale, it connects directly to historical power dynamics. It's likely a foundational myth that powerfully reinforced Crete's maritime supremacy and maybe their perceived divine right to rule the waves. It's like a collective memory of their dominance preserved in myth.
Makes sense. So they were powerful traders too, right? Not just legends.
Oh, absolutely. If we connect this mythic power back to the archaeology and other evidence, the Minoans were undeniably a wealthy sea power. They had extensive trading relationships with Egypt, Greece, the Near East, and beyond.
So a really wide network.
Huge. This wasn't just casual exchange. It was a sophisticated, widespread network that absolutely fueled their prosperity and, crucially, supported their incredible artistic output. They needed resources for that art.
Like bronze.
Especially bronze. The manufacture of bronze objects, tools, weapons, art, which was the high-tech industry of the day, developed on a vast scale on Crete. They weren't just importing copper and tin for themselves, they were mass-producing bronze goods and exporting them. The sources say they supplied all the peoples on the coasts of the eastern Mediterranean.
So they were like the bronze factory for the region.
In a way, yes. This industrial capacity, this trade dominance, effectively elevated Crete to an equal footing with Egypt and Babylon in terms of economic clout and political influence. Imagine the sheer volume of valuable goods, new ideas, different peoples constantly moving across the sea, all converging on Crete. It was a true hub. This constant exchange was the absolute lifeblood of their thriving civilization.
And they had writing, too. You mentioned that earlier. 3 kinds.
Yes, which is fascinating in itself. It shows a really complex level of administration and possibly ritual practice. First, there are their early hieroglyphics. These look a bit like Egyptian hieroglyphs, but are distinct. And frustratingly, they've largely defied translation. So their earliest secrets remain locked away.
Okay.
And then there's Linear A. This seems to have been used mainly for palaces and religious writings. It gives us glimpses into their administration and maybe spiritual records, but again, it's mostly undeciphered. We can read the signs phonetically, but we don't know the language well enough.
Right, so still mysterious. And the third one?
The third one is Linear B, and this one is different. It was apparently used only for records and inventories, the practical day-to-day administrative script, like keeping track of sheep, grain, oil, workers, that kind of thing.
Okay, more mundane stuff.
Exactly. But Linear B is hugely important because, remarkably, it was deciphered in the 1950s by Michael Ventris, and it turned out to record an early form of Greek, Mycenaean Greek specifically.
On Crete, before the classical Greeks.
Yes, an early form of Greek that predated the Greek alphabet by several centuries. Think about that Greek language written down centuries before Homer. A recent finding, relatively speaking, dates the oldest Mycenaean writing to about 1450 BCE. And these Linear B tablets are found mainly in palace archives at Knossos, but also at Cydonia on Crete, and importantly, in mainland sites like Pylos, Thebes, and Mycenae.
So Mycenaeans were using this script on Crete, or Minoans were using Greek.
Oh.
It's confusing.
It raises really important questions. It likely signifies the period when Mycenaean power was extending, perhaps even taking over Knossos around 1450 BCE. Did the conquering Mycenaeans simply adopt the existing Minoan administrative script, Linear A, and adapt it for their own Greek language, creating Linear B? Or was Linear B developed elsewhere and brought to Crete? The presence of Linear B at Knossos strongly suggests Mycenaean administrative control there in the final palace period. It gives us this profound glimpse into their complex society and the shifting power dynamics across the Aegean in the late Bronze Age.
Wow. Okay, so power shifts reflected in writing systems. What about their religion? You said it was theocratic.
Yes, the sources point to a dominant Minoan religion focusing on a great Minoan mother goddess. She seems central. And this belief system was deeply woven into the society's structure. The palaces weren't just royal homes or admin centers. They were the core of a religious system that can be termed theocratic.
Meaning religious and political power were basically the same thing, held by the same people.
Pretty much intertwined, yes. The palace was both the administrative and the spiritual heart of the community. We see this visually on a seal impression from Knossos. It shows the palace behind a goddess figure. And the palace is depicted as multi-storied and topped with these distinctive horns of consecration.
Horns, like bull horns.
Exactly. These weren't just decorations. They were a prominent, recurring symbol. And they seem to represent both sacred authority as well as political power. So a religious symbol becomes a potent emblem of the ruler's legitimacy and control. It's a visual shorthand for theocratic power.
And besides the main goddess, were there other gods?
Oh yes, they were polytheistic. They had a diverse pantheon, many gods, including bulls, snakes, men, and women. This suggests a rich spiritual landscape reflecting different aspects of nature, fertility, and human experience. The bull and the snake seem particularly important, recurring again and again in their art.
Okay, so palaces were religious centers, but did they have separate temples like the Egyptians or Mesopotamians?
That's what's really interesting archaeologically. There are no temples in Minoan Crete. No big standalone buildings dedicated solely to a god. This is a major difference. Instead, their rituals seem to have taken place within the palaces, perhaps in specific rooms or in outdoor peak sanctuaries or sacred caves. Inside the palaces, they found rooms with benches and statues, which structurally resemble shrines found elsewhere, mainland Greece, Syria, Palestine.
So like little shrine rooms inside the palace.
Seems like it. And in these spaces, people made offerings. Statuettes of human and animals, libation vessels for pouring liquids like wine or oil in portable tables, maybe for placing offerings. Terracotta statues of goddesses often stood on these benches, likely as the focus for prayers and gifts.
And how does this compare to the Mycenaeans on the mainland? Did they do similar things?
There are fascinating overlaps and differences. The archaeology suggests shared elements, like these palace-centered cults. Both lacked separate temples, both had hearths, which might have been ritual foci, and the presence of animal bones attesting to banqueting suggests communal feasts were important in both cultures, maybe tied to religious festivals or expressions of loyalty.
But were they basically the same religion?
Not identical, and crucially, this is a key insight for understanding later Greek history. Neither Minoan nor Mycenaean religious practice really foreshadows the Greek polis religion. The whole civic religious structure of classical Greece, with public temples, city patrons, state festivals, that seems to be a distinctly later development. It wasn't a direct inheritance from their Bronze Age predecessors.
So there was a break or a major shift after the Bronze Age collapsed.
Exactly. It underscores a significant evolution in how religion connected with public life and the community.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. This sounds fascinating. There's fashion. It's not something you always think about with ancient cultures.
But it tells us so much. It's a window into their sophistication, their trade, their social structure, even their sense of identity.
So were they influenced by others or totally unique?
Initially, there seems to have been influence from the big players, Egypt and Babylon, but the sources say that by the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, Cretan fashion became increasingly distinctive. They developed their own unique style, which signals, a growing confidence, a unique cultural identity asserting itself.
And they made their own textiles?
Oh yes, they were skilled. They spun wool and also used flax to make linen. And interestingly, spinning and weaving seem to have been family industries, not just palace workshops, but something done widely across the island. This suggests textiles were a common craft, maybe even a source of household income for many.
And they could dye the cloth.
Definitely. They used vegetable pigments for various colors, and notably, they extracted purple extracted from shellfish.
Ah, Tyrian purple, that incredibly valuable dye.
Precisely. The fact that they were producing this indicates really sophisticated textile production and a very valuable trade commodity. Purple was reserved for royalty or the super wealthy in many cultures.
So what did they actually wear? What did the clothes look like?
Okay, for men. Starting in the Cyclades, the basic loincloth was developed into short trousers, often neatly tucked into a belt. Seems practical for island life, maybe working on boats.
Makes sense.
But for ceremonies, for the elite, imagine this. Princes, high dignitaries, and priests wore these incredible, long, one-piece gowns in bright colors with rich embroidery. We see them depicted on things like the Hagia Triada sarcophagus figures playing flutes and lyres in these elaborate robes. These weren't everyday wear. They were serious statements of status and ritual importance.
Very different from just trousers.
Very. And then there's this curious detail. The Cretan habit of leaving the torso bare. The sources call it an inheritance from prehistory. Was it climate? Was it a cultural statement about the body, about masculinity? We don't know, but it's distinctive.
Interesting. And the women, what were they wearing?
Women's outfits seem equally, if not more, elaborate. Skirts often featured flounces sewn to their skirt. Sometimes these flounces created a really striking checkerboard pattern in brown and beige or brown and light blue. Just imagine the visual effect of that.
Very decorative.
Very. Although at Knossos, the frescoes suggest a slightly more restrained fashion, where these pointed flounces were placed only on the lower part of the skirt, so maybe regional variations or changes over time, and they typically had long hair, elaborately styled, often topped with a headdress of some kind, completing this elegant, layered look.
Sounds quite sophisticated.
Extremely. And the peak of this luxury seems to have been between about 1750 and 1450 BCE, middle Minoan III to late Minoan I. This period is described as the most luxurious for clothing. We see various pieces of sewn costume using rich textiles appearing in the art. Think diverse gowns whose forms and trimmings vary, aprons, bodices, culottes, scuts, which are like wide trousers, and several types of hat.
Wow, a whole wardrobe.
Exactly. It points to really advanced tailoring, a booming textile industry, and clearly a significant demand among the elite for diverse, fashionable, high-status garments.
And jewelry. Did they accessorize?
Oh, did they ever. Minoan women decorated their hair with gold bands or diadems or these delicate, leaf-shaped, hinged gold plates. It shows a real appreciation for intricate gold work.
Beautiful.
And perhaps the most mind-blowing example comes from the so-called treasure of Priam found at Troy, though its exact origin is debated. Part of it includes this incredible head ornament, 64 fine gold chains hanging over the brow and shoulders, and each chain ends in a tiny, delicate ornament.
64 chains. Just imagine that.
The shimmer, the movement, the sheer intricacy, it's an astonishing level of craftsmanship and just sheer opulence. It really speaks volumes about a society that valued beauty, personal expression, and the conspicuous display of wealth through adornment. And that wealth, that sophistication, is reflected nowhere more strongly than in their art and architecture. It's truly breathtaking. It represents the absolute pinnacle of their ingenuity and their aesthetic sense. The main palace sites we know on Crete are at Knossos, Phaistos, and Amalia.
Knossos being the most famous.
By far. These weren't just houses for kings. They were sprawling, multifunctional complexes. They were centers of administration, hubs of economic activity, storage depots, workshops, and, as we discussed, the very heart of their religious system.
So Knossos. Sir Arthur Evans excavated it, right? Spent his life on it.
He did. He spent the rest of his life excavating and reconstructing it, literally bringing this lost world back to light in the early 20th century. His reconstructions are debated now, but his work was foundational.
And it's linked to the labyrinth legend.
Directly. In later Greek legend, Knossos was called the labyrinth. That word might actually come from labrys, the word for the double axe symbol that appears everywhere in the palace as an architectural motif.
Ah, the double axe again.
Yep. And because the palace layout is so incredibly complex, so sprawling, almost disorienting with its corridors and rooms and different levels, the word labyrinth eventually came to mean a maze in our modern language.
Because a palace was like a maze?
Pretty much. It was a vast, spreading palace of stone and wood for the king, with many chambers above and below ground, indicating this multi-layered, highly functional structure built over generations, serving countless purposes.
How big was it?
Huge. It was built against the slopes and across the top of a low hill, covering about 6 acres.
6 acres? That's enormous. Like 6 football fields.
Roughly, yeah. And parts of it were 3 stories high. That's impressive for the Bronze Age. And it was designed with ample lighted stairways, numerous porticos, and air shafts. This gave it a surprisingly pleasantly open, airy quality.
So, not dark and pokey, despite the size.
No, they clearly understood how to use natural light and ventilation. They engineered comfort and aesthetics, harnessing their environment. The whole thing was organized around a great rectangular court at the center, measuring about 52 by 275 meters.
That's massive, like 2 football fields end to end.
Almost. A huge open space right in the middle. And around this court, the different parts of the palace were grouped, built on ground that had been leveled earlier, probably during the time of the old palace that existed before the final one we see remnants of. And architecturally, one of the most unique, visually striking details is their use of these wooden columns that taper from top to bottom.
Wider at the top, narrower at the bottom. That's the opposite of classical columns.
Exactly. It's very distinctive. They were ingeniously made from inverted tree trunks. Using the wider base of the trunk at the top provided sturdy support while creating this unique look.
Clever. Like trees.
Ah, yes. There was an ecological cost. The sources note this practice likely caused deforestation on the island, a reminder that even ancient grandeur could have an environmental impact.
What about the outside walls?
They were covered with a gleaming white lime plaster, and this plaster served as the canvas for those amazing, vibrant frescoes, adding color and stories to the whole building. The columns themselves weren't plain wood either. They were painted, typically with red shafts and black capitals, adding to the palace's really striking, colorful appearance.
And inside, how was it laid out? You said it was complex.
Incredibly well organized despite the complexity. You typically enter through the west porch, then follow a grand processional corridor, make a sharp turn through the south propylon, a kind of monumental gateway, and then boom, you emerge into that magnificent central court.
Okay, and off the court.
To the west were the main official and ceremonial rooms. These were separated by a long corridor from the storage magazines. Huge basement storerooms packed with giant jars holding olive oil, wine, grain, the palace's wealth. Then another corridor, running east-west, seemed to separate the private royal chambers, the king's and queen's areas to the south, from the servants' quarters and workshops to the north. And somewhat separate, also to the north, was this rectangular theater. It wasn't a theater like we think of it, maybe a ceremonial space, a viewing area. It's considered a possible forerunner of the semicircular Greek theater.
Early performance space, maybe.
Possibly. And central spaces like the Queen's megaron just means big room here, and the famous throne room with its gypsum throne still in place. These weren't just functional, they were the absolute heart of royal living, ritual, and governance within this dynamic, sprawling complex.
And the interiors were brought alive by these frescoes, right? You mentioned them. What did they depict?
Oh, the frescoes are stunning. They tell us so much about what the Minoans valued, what their world looked like. Sea motifs were incredibly popular. Dolphins, fish, octopuses, seaweed, reflecting their deep connection to the Aegean. Lots of birds, flowers, and marine life in general. Nature was clearly important.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. The dolphin fresco from Knossos is famous. It captures the energetic, graceful movement of dolphins leaping through the water. It almost brings the sea right into the room. Then there's the Ladies in Blue fragment, showing the heads and upper bodies of 3 women with these long, elaborate hairstyles and elegant headbands. It gives us a glimpse of their fashion, maybe their social status, perhaps even their role in rituals.
And the bull leaping one, that sounds amazing.
Ah, the Toreador fresco, also from Knossos. It's probably the most iconic and maybe the most mysterious Minoan fresco. It vividly shows figures vaulting over a charging bull, a highly athletic, incredibly dangerous activity.
What was it? A sport? A ritual?
We don't know for sure. It may have represented an initiation or fertility ritual. The bull was clearly a potent symbol for them. Power, fertility, maybe sacrifice. This fresco is so powerful, so central to their imagery, that the source directly connects it to the legend of Theseus and the Minotaur.
Right, Theseus having to face the Minotaur.
Exactly. So this fresco makes that later myth incredibly resonant. It's not just art, it's this dramatic window into their rituals, their values, the profound symbolic weight of the bull in their society. And that symbolism clearly endured for centuries, feeding into Greek mythology. And beyond the wall paintings, Minoan art includes this amazing range of pottery and vessels. They showcase incredible craftsmanship and similar thematic interests. The octopus jar from Palekastra is just a masterpiece. The octopus's tentacles seem to flow dynamically around the whole surface of the pot, perfectly fitting the shape. It feels alive.
Wow.
Then there's the harvester vase from Hagia Triada. It's fragmentary, sadly, but it shows this incredibly lively procession of men, seemingly singing or chanting, carrying winnowing fans. It looks like a harvest festival, a real snapshot of communal activity, maybe ritualistic celebration.
Like a glimpse of daily life.
Or ritual life, yeah. And another vase from Cato shows a leaping mountain goat captured with such energy and grace. It shows their artistic skill wasn't limited to marine life. They could depict terrestrial animals with equal dynamism. And for ritual purposes, they made these special vessels called rhytons. One famous example is shaped like a bull's head. It's about 4.5 inches across, beautifully crafted. A rhyton was a vessel used for pouring liquids during sacred rituals.
Pouring liquids, like wine.
Could be water, wine, maybe even blood in some rituals. You pour it into a hole, maybe in the neck, and it would flow out dramatically, perhaps through the bull's mouth in this case. This vessel, shaped like a bull's head, really emphasizes that Minoan fascination with the veneration of the bull. It's another tangible link to their spiritual practices and that recurring, powerful bull symbolism.
Okay, this next one sounds really intriguing. The snake goddess figurine.
Ah, yes, she's truly enigmatic. Found at Knossos, she's about 1 foot tall, so not huge, but very powerful. And she's made of faience.
Faience? What's that?
It's a type of glazed ceramic, basically quartz paste fired to create this lustrous, almost glassy finish. It gives the figurine a unique sheen.
And she's holding snakes.
Yes, she holds snakes coiling up her arms, and strikingly, she has a wild cat, maybe a leopard or panther, perched right on top of her elaborate crown. It adds to her mystique, suggests a connection to wild nature, maybe power over animals.
She sounds intense.
She is. And the figure skillfully blends realistic element and formal, stylized ones. Her face and body have a certain realism, but the pose, the snakes, the cat, it's highly stylized. It creates both a sense of liveliness and this powerful, almost otherworldly presence.
So is she a goddess? Or just someone involved in the rituals?
That's the ongoing debate. The style is so ambiguous, it's hard to say definitively if she represents a deity or her human attendant, maybe a priestess handling sacred snakes. What does it all mean? The source connects these snake-handling figures to very ancient, deep-rooted beliefs about water, regenerative power, and protection of the home. This kind of imagery might date back as early as 6000 BCE.
Wow, really ancient symbolism.
Yeah, suggesting a long tradition related to fertility, rebirth, protection, maybe earth goddesses. themes that span millennia. She's a prime example of an artifact that keeps sparking scholarly discussion and wonder. Reminds us how much we still don't know for sure.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the huge palaces like Knossos, right? There were other luxurious places.
Definitely. The sources mention that many luxurious villas were built at this time in the style of large palaces. Hagia Triada, where the harvester base came from, is the most famous example. These were probably private villas of a Minoan king or maybe very high-ranking nobles. It shows that the wealth and architectural sophistication weren't just confined to the main palace, it permeated the Minoan elite more broadly.
Okay, so while the Minoans are flourishing on Crete with their palaces and frescoes and snake goddesses, back on the Greek mainland, another power is rising, the Mycenaeans.
Right, located mainly in the lower rugged region of the Greek peninsula, the area we now call the Peloponnesus. Think Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos.
And their peak period overlaps with the Minoans, doesn't it?
It does. The sources are clear. Their period overlapped with the Minoan period, as Crete was still a vibrant, influential center, especially in the earlier part of the Mycenaean era. This points to a really dynamic, interconnected Aegean world where these two major powers coexisted. They must have interacted constantly.
In trade, alliances, conflict.
Probably all of the above at different times. They definitely influenced each other artistically and culturally, but they also seem to have been rivals, especially later on.
And the Mycenaeans, they're the ones Homer wrote about, right? Centuries later.
Exactly. Homer, writing maybe 700 years after their peak, described Mycenae as rich in gold. That reputation for immense wealth and power clearly stuck in Greek memory.
And the Trojan War legends, that's them too.
That's their setting. The Peloponnesus, the Mycenaean heartland, is the land of the legend of Troy. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the home turf of legendary figures like Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, or Argos, who supposedly led the Greeks against Troy, his brother Menelaus, husband of Helen. They're all central players in that epic story of the Trojan horse and the war.
It's amazing how myth and history tangle up there.
It's captivating, isn't it? It shows how Mycenaean power, their military exploits, their kings, how it all became the stuff of foundational legend for later Greeks. It shaped their cultural imagination for centuries. Their real Bronze Age history became the heroic age of myth.
So what was their society actually like
Yeah.
if Agamemnon was a king?
Well, the evidence suggests Mycenaean civilization was built on these mainland kingdoms that were tiny versions of the great states of Egypt and Mesopotamia.
Tiny, very...
Yeah, smaller in scale, certainly, than those huge Near Eastern empires. But they seem to have mirrored their structure, having centralized governments administered by elaborate bureaucracies. We see this reflected in the linear B tablets, keeping track of everything.
Okay, so organized kingdoms. But what really defined them? What made them different from the Minoans?
The big difference, they were intensely militaristic. This is probably the defining characteristic that sets them apart from the more, perhaps, mercantile and seemingly less fortified Minoans.
Militaristic. How do we know that?
Fortifications, for one, weapons and graves. Iconography focused on warfare and hunting. It paints a picture of a warrior society focused on military strength, probably a rigid hierarchy, and strong central authority needed to maintain control, defend territory, and project power. They built for defense and conquest. Now, their religion, interestingly, it shares many symbols with Minoan religion. We see those horns of consecration, for example, depicted atop their palaces, just like at Knossos.
So borrowing symbols or shared roots.
Hard to say for sure. Could be influence, inheritance, or just common Aegean symbolism. But structurally, Mycenaean palaces were different. They typically included a megaron.
A megaron. We heard that term for the queen's room at Knossos, but it's different here.
Yes, here the megaron is a specific architectural unit. A large rectangular hall, often with a porch, an anteroom, and the main hall itself featuring a large central hearth. And this megaron wasn't just a throne room. It seems to have been the absolute center of where offerings are made. It was the focal point for royal ritual and probably communal gatherings.
Okay, so a key religious and political space.
Definitely. And those linear B tablets, again, they give us glimpses into their pantheon. They record offerings being made to various gods, including names we recognize like Poseidon, Zeus, possibly Dionysus, though the source notes attestations only on Crete for him in these specific finds, and another god, Marinius, and goddesses like Potnesia, which might mean mistress, or Lady Iphimedia Duija, and Passageja, perhaps a female counterpart to Poseidon.
So familiar names mixed with less familiar ones. A complex pantheon.
Yes, Clearly polytheistic. Again, despite the differences like the megaron focus, we see those common threads with Minoan practice. Palace-centered cults, absence of separate temples, hearths, and evidence of banqueting from animal bones suggest religion was tied closely to the ruling elite and involved communal feasts.
Right, but still not leading directly to later Greek religion.
Correct. That crucial point remains. Neither foreshadows the Greek polis religion. The civic framework, the public temples, that comes later. There's a definite shift after the Bronze Age collapse in how religion operates within society.
Okay, let's talk about their architecture. The term Mycenae itself comes from the ruined palaces at Mycenae and Tiryns on the Greek mainland, right? Dating to the late Bronze Age, maybe 1600, 1250 BCE.
Exactly. Those are the type sites. And unlike the Minoan sites on Crete, which often seem open and unfortified, these Mycenaean centers were almost always placed on high ground and planned with massive fortification walls for defense.
Ah, that militaristic aspect again. Build high, build strong.
Absolutely. It immediately underscores that need for security, that focus on defense against, well, maybe rival Mycenaean kingdoms or outside threats. The citadel at Mycenae, the one later Greeks called the home of the conquerors of Troy, is the classic example. It's a true citadel, an area strategically placed in a high commanding place, naturally defensible, and then enhanced with these incredible ring walls.
Built with huge stone, Cyclopean masonry.
Precisely. Walls built from massive, roughly worked boulders, so impressive that later Greeks thought only the mythical Cyclopes could have built them. It's a visible symbol of their power and the centralized authority needed to mobilize such labor.
And the entrance to Mycenae, the Lion Gate. That sounds amazing.
It really is. Dates to around 1300, 1200 BCE. It's an iconic piece of engineering and art. The gateway itself is impressive, but above the lintel, there's this triangular slab featuring a pair of 9.5 feet tall protector lions flanking a central column, maybe representing the palace or the ruling dynasty.
9.5 feet tall. Those are huge lions.
But massive. And they're perched on what looks like an altar. Originally, these weren't carved from the same block. They were made separately of bronze or gold, then fastened into holes in the stone.
Bronze or gold. Wow. Imagine seeing that gleaming in the sun.
Must have been incredibly imposing. It shows sophisticated craftsmanship, combining stonework with valuable metal additions for maximum effect.
And how did they build the gate itself? It's a big opening.
They used basic post and lintel construction for the doorway, 2 upright posts holding a massive horizontal lintel throne. But above that lintel, they put a relieving arch.
A relieving arch, what's that do?
It's a clever trick. It's a corbel arch, made by projecting stones inwards layer by layer until they meet built into the wall above the lintel. Its purpose was to relieve the lintel of the weight of the wall that rose above it, which was maybe 50 feet high. It channels the way away from the middle of the lintel, preventing it from cracking.
That's smart engineering. It shows they really understood structural mechanics.
Absolutely. Very advanced for the time. And we see similar impressive defensive stuff at other sites, like Tiryns. There are photos showing an aerial view of the citadel at Tiryns, and these amazing corbelled galleries built right inside the thickness of the massive walls, like stone tunnels within the walls.
Incredible, purely defensive architecture.
Primarily, yes. And just to recap their building techniques for spanning openings, the sources mention 3 methods. The basic post and lintel, the corbelled arch like in the galleries and relieving triangles, and the true arch with wedge-shaped stones, although the true arch wasn't as widely used in their major structures as the corbelled method. But they understood the principle. Now, shifting from defense to death, their burial practices are just as fascinating and offer profound insights into their beliefs. Let's talk about the treasury of Atreus, also called the tomb of Agamemnon at Mycenae, dates to around 1250 BCE.
A treasury? Was it full of treasure?
Well, it was certainly a tomb for someone incredibly important, likely a king, and would have been filled with rich grave goods originally, but it was looted in antiquity. The name treasury came later. Architecturally, it's an impressive tholos tomb, sometimes called a beehive tomb.
Beehive? Because of the shape.
Exactly. It's built underground, usually into a hillside. You enter through a long passage, the dromos, and then into this large circular chamber with a high corbelled dome. It's built with carefully cut stones, layered so that each level projects slightly over the one below it, gradually creating this smooth, tapering dome shape, like an old-fashioned beehive.
Must have been incredibly difficult to build.
The engineering is astounding. Just get this. The lintel stone above the doorway weighs 120 tons.
120 tons. That's insane. How did they even move it?
We still debate the exact methods. Ramps, levers, massive amounts of coordinated human labor. It's heavier than a blue whale, apparently the largest single lintel stone used anywhere in the world at that time. It's a testament to their engineering skill and the power of the rulers who could command such projects. And these tombs weren't just holes in the ground for bodies, they were imbued with deep symbolic meaning, guiding the transition to the afterlife. The dromos, that long entrance passage, is interpreted as conveying the values and meaning of our long and sometimes difficult life path. It prepares you ritually for entering the sacred space.
Okay, the journey.
And then the tholos itself, the beehive chamber, its shape symbolizing the dome of heaven, was thought to point to reward and bliss. It offers this really profound insight into their worldview, their beliefs about death, and the afterlife. The tomb wasn't just a resting place, it was a symbolic journey and a gateway to the heavens, providing meaning and maybe comfort through this monumental, carefully designed architecture.
Wow. Okay, so amazing architecture for the living and the dead. What about their smaller art? You mentioned Mycenae was rich in gold.
And the art reflects that. Beyond the architecture, Mycenae art is really characterized by its richness, especially the use of gold and ivory. These were prestige materials reflecting the wealth and status of their warrior elite.
Any examples?
Sure. Remember the Minoan bull's head rhyton? The Mycenaeans made them too. There's a famous rhyton in lion's head shape, made of gold about 8 inches high, found in one of the shaft graves at Mycenae. Again, a ritual vessel, but this time a lion may be reflecting their more martial, kingly focus compared to the Minoan bull.
Interesting comparison.
What else? Then there are the famous Vifeo cups. These are a pair of gold cups about 3.5 inches high, dating maybe to 1500 BC. They're decorated with incredibly detailed scenes of capturing bulls, one peacefully, one violently.
Gold cups with bull scenes. Sounds amazing.
They are stunning. And technically, they demonstrate the repoussé technique. That's where the metal is hammered from the back to make a relief design on the front. It requires incredible skill and control to create such detailed scenes on curved gold surfaces. Really sophisticated metalworking.
And ivory. You mentioned ivory.
Yes, they were skilled ivory carvers, too. There's a small piece, only about 3 inches high, from Mycenae depicting 3 deities, perhaps 2 goddesses and a child. It shows they could achieve delicate, intricate craftsmanship in different precious materials, not just gold. It highlights the versatility and skill of their artists.
Okay, we've seen the grand palaces, the tombs, the art. But what about just like the inside of their houses or palaces? What do they look like on a daily basis?
That's a bit harder to reconstruct fully. While the Minoans and Mycenaeans were distinct, they both give us tantalizing clues about their interior spaces. We have fragments of painted tiles, pottery, and of course those amazing wall paintings, the frescoes. These give us some idea of the design vocabulary, the colors they like, the patterns, the motifs from nature or ritual.
So we get glimpses.
Glimpses, exactly. But the sources are quite honest. There are no intact pieces of everyday furniture or other artifacts to suggest a more complete sense of the interior vernacular of houses. We don't have, say, a fully furnished Minoan living room.
Ah, shame. So we're missing the chairs, the tables, the beds, the everyday stuff.
Pretty much. Which raises that important question. How much can we really infer about their daily comfort, their domestic routines, how they actually lived in these spaces from the fragments that remain? How much is lost to time? We're piecing together a fascinating puzzle, but lots of pieces are definitely missing. That said, the palace at Knossos gives us our best and most detailed picture of Minoan interior design. It really conveys a sense of grandeur and innovation. Remember how it was organized around that huge central court? That emphasized openness, flow.
Right, and the light wells, the staircases.
Exactly. The ample lighted stairways, the numerous porticos and air shafts. They all suggest a deliberate design choice, aiming for that open, airy quality. It wasn't just about looking good, it was about creating a comfortable, pleasant environment, using natural light and air circulation, which would be vital in Crete's warm climate.
Smart design.
Very. And within the palace, key rooms like the queen's megaron and the throne room would have been the most lavishly decorated spaces. And those frescoes we talked about, the dolphins, the flowers, the bull leaping, they tell us the interiors weren't just functional. They were aesthetically rich, vibrant, full of life, and deeply connected to their culture and beliefs. Imagine living surrounded by walls that celebrated nature and depicted dramatic rituals.
Must have been quite an environment. Now, what about the Mycenaeans? Their interiors, you mentioned the megaron was key.
Yes. The Mycenaean megaron was the absolute central feature of their palaces, and its influence extended down into their domestic architecture, too. It was a very specific, strongly axial space. Usually that large rectangular or square room with a central hearth below a raised roof with an opening through which the smoke could escape.
The hearth being crucial.
Absolutely, not just for warmth, but as the focal point for gatherings. Banqueting, probably rituals, maybe the king holding court.
Yeah.
It was the symbolic heart of the palace.
In the entrance.
Typically featured a porch with 2 columns. And these columns, like the ones inside supporting the roof around the hearth, often tapered from a larger capital to a smaller base.
Ah, the Minoan-style tapering column again.
Seems like it, yeah. Wider at the top, narrower at the bottom. It's a fascinating echo showing how architectural ideas clearly traveled and were adapted across the Aegean, even between these potentially rival cultures.
And the floors. Walls.
The floor of the megaron was often paved with decorated tiles, adding another layer of visual richness and status to these important rooms. As for the roof style, we don't know exactly how it was finished, but the sources suggest it might have been decorated with complex, abstract, painted patterns. This hints at a really rich internal decorative scheme, maybe geometric or stylized, that would have complemented the frescoes found in other parts of the palace. It was definitely a space designed to impress, to project royal authority. But beyond the palaces, what about ordinary people? Where did they live?
Good question. What do the town excavations show?
They reveal a very different picture. Excavations of common town sites show these compact clusters of houses, usually of 4 or 5 rooms. Not huge places, and they were grouped along narrow streets or alleys winding about without formal plan.
So not a neat grid layout like some Roman towns.
No, much more organic. It suggests dense settlements where ordinary people lived close together, their houses perhaps built incrementally over time, following the contours of the land rather than a grand, preconceived design. It gives us a tangible sense of more common, everyday living conditions, neighbors sharing winding pathways, much smaller houses, a stark contrast to the vast, planned spaces of their rulers.
So a big difference between the elite and everyone else.
Absolutely. Tells us that despite the undeniable grandeur of the palace cultures, much of the population live in more humble yet functional urban or village environments.
Okay, so we've seen these incredible civilizations rise, flourish, build amazing things.
Yeah.
But they didn't last forever. What happened? How did it all end?
It's a story with 2 main parts, it seems. For the Minoans on Crete, the end appears relatively sudden and catastrophic. The sources tell us the major cities on Crete were all destroyed around 1400 BCE, probably by an earthquake.
Or the Thera eruption.
Yeah. The Thera eruption happened earlier, around 1600 BCE, and while it must have had huge impacts, the final destructions around 1400 BCE seem more likely linked to earthquakes, or possibly Mycenaean invasion, or a combination. But the result was the effective end of Minoan civilization as a dominant, independent power. It wasn't a slow decline, it seems more like a series of devastating events.
Wow, a dramatic end. What about the Mycenaeans? They lasted longer.
They did. Their civilization, though militaristic and robust, eventually faced its own demise. It lasted until sometime between 1200 and 1000 BCE. The end here seems more complex, possibly involving internal strife, systems collapse, climate change, and ultimately displacement by a migration of Dorian invaders from the north.
The Dorians we mentioned earlier, the ones who became the later Greeks.
Well, part of the mix that formed later Greek identity, yes. Their arrival, or maybe uprising, marks this significant dramatic transition in the Aegean. One dominant cultural and political system gives way, and it ushers in a period we often call the Greek Dark Ages, a time of population decline, loss of literacy, linear B disappears, and generally less archaeological evidence. A period of profound societal change. But if we connect this collapse to the bigger picture, the end of these Bronze Age political systems didn't mean their influence just vanished into thin air. It was more like a profound transformation. Their achievements echoed.
How so? What lasted?
Well, their artistic styles, for one. Think about the elegant simplicity of those Cycladic figures, focusing on essence. Think about the vibrant, nature-filled Minoan frescoes, or the imposing gold-heavy art and monumental citadels of the Mycenaeans. These styles, these ways of seeing and representing the world, they resonated for centuries.
And architecture.
Their architectural innovations, too. Things like the corbel arch, which allowed them to build those massive tombs and galleries, the megaron plan, which arguably became a blueprint for early Greek temples. These techniques and forms continued to inform later building practices.
And the myths The stories must have survived.
Absolutely. Even their myths, the labyrinth, the Minotaur, the bull jumping, the whole epic saga of the Trojan War, these stories were absorbed, retold, reinterpreted, and became absolutely foundational elements for the cultures that followed, especially classical Greece. So while their direct political structures crumbled, their cultural legacy became the deep, rich soil from which the classical Greek world eventually grew.
So they didn't just disappear, they became part of the foundation.
Exactly. Which raises that fascinating question. How much of our own cultural heritage today, our art, our literature, our ideas about heroism, maybe even governance, can ultimately be traced back through Greece and Rome to these Bronze Age pioneers? Even though their world eventually fell apart, their ideas, their stories, their creations, they continue to echo through time. Their collapse created a void, perhaps, but their legacy filled it in new ways.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive that was. Seriously, almost 2,000 years covered. We've gone from those enigmatic Cycladic figures, so simple yet powerful, to the sprawling, almost dizzying palaces of Knossos, full of color and life.
Yeah, the labyrinth itself.
And then onto the formidable, heavily fortified citadels of Mycenae, home of legendary warriors. We've touched on their complex religions centered in the palaces, their amazing fashion sense, especially the Minoans.
The flounced skirts and gold chains.
Right. And we've seen how they really laid a foundational impact for what eventually became Western civilization. It's just incredible how much we can actually piece together, isn't it? From ruins, fragments, and those later stories.
It really is remarkable. Even with all the gaps, the picture that emerges is so rich. So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with as we wrap up. Consider this. The Minoans and the Mycenaeans, each in their own time, built these impressive societies, empires almost, based on sophisticated trade, cutting-edge technology for their day, innovation, and undeniable power, sea power for one, military might for the other.
Yeah, real powerhouses.
But ultimately, they vanished as political entities. They collapsed, leaving behind these stunning archaeological puzzles and this rich, sometimes hard-to-read legacy. So what lessons can we draw from their rise and their fall? What does it tell us about complex societies, about their resilience or their fragility in the face of internal issues or external pressures like climate change or invasion?
Big questions. Relevant questions, maybe.
I think so. And just on a more personal level, what stands out to you listening to this? How did these ancient people, so distant from us in time, choose to express their power, their faith, the essence of their daily lives? What choices did they make in their art, their architecture, that still speak to us across millennia? How do their ancient stories resonate with our world today?
Lots to think about there. Keep exploring, everyone. Keep asking questions and keep digging deeper into all these fascinating layers of history. We really hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective, maybe a richer understanding of this truly foundational period that shaped so much of what followed.